Navy Lieutenant Zach Morgan stood by the large window of Andromeda Outpost watching the stars. His tall frame reflected in the glass as he adjusted his formal uniform. The Earth delegation had sent him as their representative to this grand meeting of species across the galaxy, but he felt out of place among the many alien forms that moved through the grand hall behind him. Zach turned from the window and walked back toward the main gathering. His mission was simple: attend the talks, smile, and not cause any trouble. He was not meant to make decisions, just observe and report back. The captain had been clear about that. The hall was filled with beings from 100 worlds. Some looked almost human, while others seemed like walking dreams or nightmares. Zach moved between them, nodding politely and trying to remember the proper greetings for each species. His training had prepared him for this. But the reality of standing among so many alien life forms still made his heart beat faster. It was then that he saw her. Across the crowded space stood a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with skin that seemed to glow like moonlight. Her ears came to delicate points, and her silver hair was braided with small crystals that caught the light. She moved with the grace of a dancer, but the confidence of a warrior. The crowd parted around her as if they sensed her importance, but what truly caught his eye was her armor. It wrapped her form like a second skin, made of some metal that shifted colors with her movements, deep blues and purples with hints of gold that reminded Zach of the nebula visible outside the station windows. Strange marks covered the surface, glowing with their own inner light. The armor seemed alive somehow, responding to her movements like it was part of her body, not just a protective shell. And at her side walked a creature that made Zach freeze in place. A dragon. No bigger than a large dog, but unmistakably a dragon. Its scales matched her armor exactly, that same shifting blue-purple with gold edges. Its eyes were intelligent, far too intelligent for a simple animal, and it moved with the same grace as its master. The dragon scanned the room as if looking for threats, its gaze passing over Zach briefly before moving on. Zach could not look away. He should return to his delegation. He should focus on his mission. But his feet carried him forward through the crowd, toward the mysterious woman and her even more mysterious companion. She noticed his approach, her eyes finding his across the room. They were violet and ancient, seeming to see right through him. She did not smile, but inclined her head slightly, an acknowledgement of his existence. Standing before her, Zach suddenly realized he had no plan, no reason to approach her. The words he had prepared for diplomatic meetings fled his mind. He opened his mouth, hoping something intelligent would come out. "Your armor is beautiful," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "The craftsmanship is unlike anything I have seen." The hall went silent. Everyone nearby turned to stare, some with shock, others with something that looked like amusement. The woman herself widened her eyes for just a moment before her face returned to its calm mask. But the dragon at her side made a sound almost like laughter. "I am Commander Faye Winters of the Sylvan Confederacy," she said, her voice musical yet strong. "And you are Lieutenant Zach Morgan, Earth Delegation," he replied, automatically extending his hand, then pulling it back when he remembered that not all species appreciated human greeting customs. The dragon moved forward, suddenly circling Zach, sniffing at his uniform, then looking up at Faye. The creature made a soft chirping sound, and Faye raised an eyebrow. "How interesting," she said. "Ember seems to approve of you." "This is unexpected." Approve of what? Zach asked, confused by the sudden attention from everyone around them. Had he broken some rule of etiquette? Faye tilted her head, studying him. "Are you not aware of what you have done, human?" Before Zach could answer, a tall elf in elaborate robes stepped forward, bowing to Faye, then looking at Zach with undisguised curiosity. "The proposal has been made and accepted, Commander," he said. "We must prepare for the ceremony. The High Council will be most interested in this development proposal ceremony." "What are you talking about?" Zach asked, feeling suddenly out of his depth. The diplomatic briefing had said nothing about proposals or ceremonies. Faye regarded him with those ancient violet eyes. "You complimented my battle armor, human among my people. Such a compliment from a warrior to another warrior is a formal proposal of marriage, and Ember has given her blessing, which means the match is considered divinely sanctioned. Zack felt the blood drain from his face. Marriage. But your armor really is amazing. But I wasn't proposing. A small smile touched Faye's lips. Intent does not matter, only the words spoken and the response given. My dragon has accepted you, and so by our most ancient laws, so must I. The dragon Ember looked up at Zack with what could only be described as amusement in its intelligent eyes. The creature made another chirping sound, and small flames danced between its teeth. You must come with us now, Faye said. The Starlight Sentinel. My ship awaits. We have much to prepare. You are to be my consort. 2 tall elven guards appeared beside Zack, one on each side. They did not touch him, but their presence made it clear that refusal was not an option. But my mission, Zack protested. My delegation, I can't just leave. One of the Earth officials, a woman named Samantha, pushed through the crowd. Her face showed confusion and alarm. Lieutenant Morgan, what is happening here? Before Zack could explain, the robed elf stepped forward. This human has entered into a binding agreement with Commander Winters. He will be returning with us to complete the Sacred Union. Sacred Union, Samantha repeated, looking at Zack with wide eyes. Lieutenant, did you propose to an alien dignitary? I complimented her armor, Zack said weakly. I didn't know it meant anything. The elven official produced a small device that projected an image of ancient text. This is the Treaty of First Contact between Earth and the Sylvan Confederacy, signed 80 of your Earth years ago. It clearly states that all cultural customs will be respected and honored by both parties. Section 12, paragraph 4 specifically mentions marriage proposals. Samantha scanned the text, her expression growing increasingly concerned. It seems, Lieutenant Morgan, that you have indeed committed yourself to this arrangement. According to this treaty, we are bound to honor their customs, just as they honor ours. Zack looked from Samantha to Faye to the dragon that had apparently decided his fate. The creature was now sitting at his feet, looking up at him with those knowing eyes. So that's it, Zack asked. I accidentally propose. And now, am getting married to someone I just met. Faye stepped closer to him, her armor shifting colors as she moved. You should feel honored, human. Not in 500 years has a Sylvan commander taken a consort from outside our realm. You will want for nothing, and your status among the stars will be great. The dragon chirped again and rubbed against Zack's leg like a cat marking its territory. We depart immediately, Faye announced. The ceremony must take place during the alignment of the 3 moons of Sylvantide. This occurs in 14 days. We must make haste. Before Zack could protest further, he found himself being escorted toward the docking bay. Faye walking ahead, her silver hair and magical armor drawing every eye. The dragon Ember trotted at his side, occasionally looking up at him with what seemed like encouragement. As they boarded the sleek elven ship, Zack caught a last glimpse of Earth officials watching with mixed expressions of concern and fascination. The ship's interior was all curved lines and living metal, with soft light coming from nowhere and everywhere. Welcome to your new home, consort, Morgan, Faye said. This will be a union spoken of for generations to come. As the ship pulled away from the station, Zack watched the stars blur into streaks of light. He had only meant to give a compliment. Now he was heading across the galaxy to marry an elven commander he had just met, with only her dragon as a seemingly approving witness to his fate. Ember curled up at his feet, the dragon's warmth spreading through his boots. The creature looked up at him, and in that moment Zack had the strange feeling that none of this was truly an accident. The Starlight Sentinel moved through space like a living thing. The ship hummed with energy that Zack could feel through the soles of his boots. 7 days had passed since his accidental proposal, and life aboard the elven vessel was unlike anything he had experienced on Earth vessels. Zack sat in his quarters, which were far more luxurious than his small apartment. Back on Earth, the walls seemed to be made of living wood that glowed softly, providing light without any visible source. The bed was large and surprisingly comfortable, though the elven tendency to sleep in a semicircular position had required some adjustment. Ember, the midnight blue dragon, lay curled at the foot of his bed. The creature had hardly left his side since they boarded the ship. Zack had initially been wary of the dragon, but over the days a strange bond had formed between them. He found he could almost sense what Ember was feeling. Sometimes he would even catch impressions like images or emotions that seemed to come from the dragon. This is all crazy, right? Zack said to Ember. I'm marrying someone I just met because I said her armor looked nice. Ember lifted her head and made a soft trilling sound that Zack had come to recognize as amusement. The dragon stood stretched like a cat and then padded across the bed to nudge Zack's hand with her snout. When he touched her scales, he felt a wave of reassurance flow through him. It's weird that I can feel what you're trying to tell me, Zack said, scratching behind Ember's ear ridges where she seemed to enjoy it most. Is this normal? A knock at his door interrupted their moment. Commander Faye Winters stood at the entrance. Her silver hair was loose today, falling past her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight. She had exchanged her ceremonial armor for a simpler version, though it still shifted colors with her movements. We will reach the Aldari Nebula soon, she said. You should witness it from the observation deck. Many humans never get to see such sights. Zack nodded and followed her through the corridors of the ship, Ember trotting alongside them. The elven crew they passed bowed slightly to Faye but looked at Zack with expressions ranging from curiosity to what seemed like disapproval. Does your crew always stare at visitors like this? Zack asked as they walked. They are curious, Faye replied without looking back. It has been many cycles since a human has been aboard one of our vessels, and none have ever been betrothed to a commander. They reached the observation deck, a large circular room with walls that seemed to vanish entirely, providing an unobstructed view of space. Faye gestured for him to step forward. Zack gasped as the nebula came into view. Vast clouds of purple and blue, gas swirled across the blackness of space. Stars were being born within the cosmic storm, their light piercing through the colorful haze. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It's magnificent, he whispered. Faye stepped beside him, her shoulder nearly touching his. Yes. The Aldari is sacred to my people. We believe it is where the first dragons came into being before they spread across the stars. Ember chirped in what sounded like agreement. The dragon sat between them, looking out at the nebula with apparent recognition. You and Ember. Zack began, hesitant to ask the question that had been on his mind. Is she really your pet? Faye looked at him sharply. She is no pet. Ember is my bonded companion, my protector and advisor. Dragons choose. They're elven partners. We do not own them. Sorry, Zack said quickly. I meant no offense. It's just on Earth dragons are myths. Creatures of legend. I don't know the proper terms. Faye's expression softened slightly. There is much you do not know about our ways. This is why the journey to Sylvantide will give us time to prepare you. Ember chose to accept your proposal. That is significant. Wait. Zack turned to face her fully. The dragon accepted my proposal. Not you. Ember made a sound that was unmistakably laughter when a warrior compliments another warrior's armor. It is the dragon companion who decides if the match is worthy, Faye explained. Among my people, we believe dragons see the truth of a person's soul. They cannot be deceived by false words or intentions. When Ember accepted you, she was confirming that our life forces are compatible. Zack looked down at Ember, who was watching him with those intelligent eyes. So I have no say in this matter, and neither do you. Before Faye could answer, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the ship shifted suddenly, throwing Zack off balance. Faye caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Attackers, she said, her voice suddenly hard. She touched a small crystal on her. Frisk Commander to bridge report. Voice came through what seemed to be the air itself. Void collective vessels, 3 of them. They emerged from the nebula. No warning, Faye turned to Zack. Stay here with Ember. She will protect you. But I can help, Zack, protested trained for combat situations. Faye hesitated, then nodded. Very well. Come, but stay close. They raced through the corridors of the ship, crew members rushing to battle stations. Faye led him to the bridge, a circular room with a central platform, surrounded by control stations operated by elven officers. The view screen showed 3 black ships approaching their vessel. The design was unlike anything Zack had seen before, jagged and asymmetrical, as if torn from the darkness of space itself. Void Collective, Faye said, her voice filled with contempt. They seek our technology, our magic. They have pursued my people for centuries. The ship shook as it took a hit. Damage reports scrolled across screens in an elvish script. Zack couldn't read shield. Integrity at 60%, an officer reported. We cannot outrun them, Commander. The nebula interferes with our engines. Faye stood tall, her face a mask of determination. Prepare the light cannons. Target their propulsion systems. Another blast rocked, the ship throwing several crew members from their stations. A panel exploded in a shower of spark shield generators offline. The tactical officer called. Their boarding vessels are approaching port side. We cannot stop them. Faye turned to Zack. Her eyes intense. They must not take you. If they learn of our bonding ceremony, they will use you against us, against our people. Another explosion larger than before sent them all to the floor. Zack scrambled to his feet, pulling Faye up beside him. Ember growled, her scales bristling and changing from blue to a deep angry red. The dragon's reaction gave Zack an idea. The nebula, you said it's where dragons come from. Could Ember use that? Somehow. Faye stared at him, then at Ember. The dragon was already looking at Zack, her eyes glowing with an inner fire. She chirped and nudged Faye's hand. It is dangerous, Faye said, but possible. Ember would need to channel the energy through the ship systems, but the connection would require a bond stronger than we currently have. The bridge doors slid open with a hiss. 2 elven guards rushed in. We have intruders. Commander. They have breached levels 3 and 4. They move toward the engine core. Make the decision quickly. Zack urged. Whatever this connection is, we need it now. Faye took his hand and placed it on Ember's head, then laid her own hand over his. The dragonfire bond must be initiated, she said, looking into his eyes. This will link us permanently before the ceremony. Are you willing? The ship shook, again more violently. Emergency lights flashed throughout the bridge. Screams and weapon fire could be heard from the corridors. Zack met her gaze. Do it, Faye began speaking in an ancient language. The words seemed to hang in the air, glowing slightly. Ember closed her eyes and a warmth began to spread from where their hands touched the dragon. The heat increased, becoming almost painful. But Zack did not pull away. Suddenly his mind was filled with images. Faye's memories. Her childhood on a world of crystal trees. Her first meeting with Ember when the dragon was newly hatched, her rise through the ranks of the Sylvan military. The respect she commanded, the loneliness she felt. And he knew she was seeing his memories too. His parents, his training, his hopes and fears. Everything laid bare between them. Ember growled louder, the sound vibrating through the ship. The dragon's scales began to glow brighter and brighter until Zack had to close his eyes against the light. He felt energy flowing through him, through Faye, through Ember, and into the ship itself. When he opened his eyes again, the view screen showed the nebula, swirling and churning. Tendrils of cosmic gas reached out like living things wrapping around the enemy vessels. The black ships struggled, trying to break free, but the nebula pulled them deeper into its embrace. The energy drain ended as suddenly as it had begun. Zack gasped, feeling weakened, but strangely exhilarated. Faye swayed on her feet, and he caught her arm, steadying her. Their eyes met, and for the first time he saw genuine emotion in her gaze. Respect, gratitude, and something more. The tactical officer looked up from his station in awe. The enemy vessels have been neutralized, Commander. The nebula. It responded. To Ember, Faye nodded. The ancient bond still exists, she said softly. She turned to the crew. Begin repairs. We continue to Sylvantide. The crew moved with renewed purpose. Faye gestured for Zack to follow her from the bridge. Ember trotting beside them. They walked in silence until they reached a quiet alcove with a view of the now peaceful nebula. You risked much today, Faye said. She was standing close enough that Zack could see flecks of gold in her violet eyes. The emergency bond we formed, it is not easily broken. I figured that Zack said I could feel what was happening. The connection between us. Faye reached out hesitantly and touched his face. Her fingers cool against his skin. You are not what I expected. Human, I thought you would be. Weak, frightened by our ways. Zack smiled. I am frightened, but that doesn't mean I won't stand my ground. Ember made a pleased sound, nudging both their hands until they touched. The dragon looked satisfied. Sylvantide appeared first as a glowing green jewel against the blackness of space. As the Starlight Sentinel drew closer, Zack could make out vast continents covered in forests so dense they looked like emerald carpets. Great oceans of turquoise. Water reflected the light of 3 moons that orbited the planet. The smallest details became visible as they entered the atmosphere. Crystal cities built into the canopies of trees taller than Earth skyscrapers. Floating platforms drifting between. The spires connected by bridges of light. This is your world, Zack said in awe as he stood beside Faye on the bridge. Our ancestral home, she corrected. The Sylvan people have colonies across 17 star systems, but this is where our race began. This is where the first bond between dragon and elf was formed. Ember chirped in agreement. The dragon had grown increasingly excited as they approached the planet, bouncing on her claws and making happy trilling sounds. The ship descended toward the largest of the crystal cities. Its towers seemed to grow from the trees themselves, spiraling upward in impossible configurations that defied human architectural understanding. Zack could see hundreds of dragons flying between the structures, some as small as Ember, others large enough to carry multiple riders on their backs. We will dock at the High Command Spire. Faye said, there will be a delegation to greet us. My people are eager to meet the human who won the approval of a dragon. Zack smoothed down his uniform, which had been replicated to match elven formal wear. The material was lighter than anything made on Earth, and seemed to adjust to his body temperature, keeping him perfectly comfortable. Will your family be there? He asked. Faye was quiet. For a moment, my parents returned to the great forest many cycles ago, she finally said. But my mentor, Admiral Lydia Blackwood, will stand in their place. She has been like a mother to me since I was young. The ship docked with barely a tremor. A soft chime announced their arrival. Faye led Zack through the corridors, Ember walking proudly between them. The crew they passed bowed deeply now, showing none of the earlier skepticism Zack had noticed. The news of how he had helped during the Void Collective attack had spread quickly throughout the ship. The airlock doors opened, revealing a grand reception hall. Sunlight filtered through crystal walls, creating rainbows that danced across the floor. A group of tall elves in elaborate ceremonial armor waited for them. Their faces were solemn, but Zack could sense curiosity in their gazes. At the center of the group stood a regal elven woman with dark hair streaked with silver. Her armor was more elaborate than the others, with runes that glowed. With inner fire, a dragon larger than Ember with scales of deep crimson stood at her side, Commander Winters. The woman said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. We welcome your return, and we welcome your chosen consort, Faye. Bowed her head slightly. Admiral Blackwood, I present Lieutenant Zack Morgan of Earth. He has proven himself worthy during our journey. Admiral Blackwood studied Zack with keen eyes that missed nothing. I have heard the reports, she said. Your actions against the Void Collective were impressive for a human. Thank you, Admiral, Zack replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I did what was necessary. The Admiral nodded, then turned to address the assembled elves. The council awaits us. The ceremony preparations must begin immediately. The alignment of the 3 moons begins in 3 days' time. The group moved through the crystal spire. Zack tried not to stare at everything they passed, but it was difficult. The walls themselves seemed alive, shimmering with colors that responded to their presence. Elves they passed stopped to watch them, some bowing, others whispering behind their hands. They entered a vast circular chamber. The ceiling opened to the sky above, where 2 of the 3 moons were visible even in daylight. Seated in a semicircle on raised platforms were 13 elves in flowing robes. Their faces were ageless, showing neither youth nor old age, but a timeless quality that made Zack feel incredibly young by comparison. At the center sat an elf with pure white hair and eyes that glowed with inner light. She stood as they entered, her movements fluid like water. The Council of 13 welcomes Commander Winters and her chosen consort, she announced. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. We gather to witness this historic union, the first between our kind and humanity in over 500 years. Zack felt the weight of history pressing down on him. These beings had lived for centuries, had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, while humans were still figuring out space travel. He straightened his shoulders, determined not to show weakness. The white-haired elf descended from her platform, moving toward them with ethereal grace. "I am Elder Natalie," she said. "Keeper of ancient ways, I will oversee your bonding ceremony, Elder." Natalie circled Zack, studying him from all angles. Her gaze was penetrating, as if she could see through his skin to his very soul. At last, she stopped before him. "There is more to you than appears human," she said. "You carry old blood. Very old indeed. This explains much." Zack frowned. "What do you mean, old blood?" Before she could answer, another council member rose. His face was stern, his eyes cold. "You move too quickly, Elder," he said. "We must be certain this human is worthy of such a union. The prophecy speaks of careful timing. This may be premature, Elder." Natalie turned her glowing gaze to the speaker. "The dragon has chosen. Counselor Alvin, the stars have aligned. The Void Collective attacks grow bolder." Cannot ignore the signs, Zack looked at Faye questioningly. "What prophecy?" Admiral Blackwood stepped forward. "Perhaps we should allow the human to rest. The journey was difficult. The explanations can wait, Elder." Natalie nodded. "You will be taken to the preparation chambers. The ceremony requires purification and instruction. You have much to learn in little time." Guards appeared at Zack's sides, not threatening but clearly there to escort him. He looked at Faye, unsure. "Go," Faye said softly. "I too must prepare. We will meet again at the evening meal." Ember nuzzled Zack's hand, then followed Faye as she left with the Admiral. Zack watched them go, feeling suddenly alone among these ancient beings. The preparation chambers turned out to be a suite of rooms larger than his entire apartment building back on Earth. The walls were living crystal that changed colors with his mood, currently showing swirls of blue and purple reflecting his uncertainty and wonder. A group of elven attendants appeared, bringing strange foods and drinks. Zack's uniform was taken away, replaced with soft garments made of a material that felt like silk but stronger. Attendants explained the complex rituals he would need to perform during the ceremony, speaking slowly, in careful English. After several hours of instruction, Zack was left alone to rest, his head swimming with information. He sat on a cushioned bench near a window that overlooked the vast forest below. The 3 moons were now visible in the darkening sky, moving steadily toward alignment. A soft scratching at his door caught his attention. Before he could respond, Ember slipped into the room. The dragon looked around cautiously, then padded over to him. "What are you doing here?" Zack asked. "I thought you were supposed to stay with Faye." Ember chirped quietly and bumped her head against his hand. When he touched her scales, images flooded his mind. Faye arguing with the council, Admiral Blackwood looking concerned, Elder Natalie speaking of ancient prophecies. "They aren't telling me everything, are they?" Zack asked. Ember made a sound that seemed like agreement. She nudged him toward the door, her intention clear. "Are you saying we should go somewhere?" Zack whispered. The dragon nodded and moved to the door, looking back expectantly. "This is probably going to get me in trouble," Zack muttered, but he followed anyway. Ember led him through hidden passages that seemed to be carved within the living trees themselves. They moved downward, spiraling deeper, into the trunk. Eventually, they emerged into a vast chamber lit by bioluminescent plants. The walls were covered in carvings depicting elves and dragons in various scenes of battle and peace. But what caught Zack's attention was the center of the room. There, floating in a beam of light, was a set of armor. Unlike the armor worn by the elven soldiers, this seemed ancient. The metal, if it was metal, shifted and moved like liquid. Its surface was covered in runes, similar to those on Faye's armor, but older, more complex. Ember chirped and nudged him forward. "What is this place?" Zack asked. But he knew somehow that this armor was important. Connected to the ceremony. Connected to him. "Zack, I heard you might be here." He spun around to find a young elven woman standing in the doorway. She wore simple robes, unlike the elaborate dress of the council members. Her expression was friendly, Open, who are you? Zack asked. My name is Kira. She said, I work in the archives. I'm not supposed to be here either. She smiled conspiratorially. But I thought you deserved to know the truth before the ceremony. What truth? Zack asked. Kira moved further into the chamber, gesturing at the armor. That is the armor of binding, she explained. It was worn by the first elven warrior to bond with a dragon 5,000 years ago. The legend says the armor contains the essence of dragon magic. It is what makes our bond with dragons possible. Ember chirped in agreement. And what does this have to do with me? Zack asked Kira, studied him for a moment. The council believes you are part of a prophecy, she said. One that speaks of a bridge between worlds. A being of mixed blood who would renew the ancient bond in a time of great need. Mixed blood. Zack repeated, remembering. Elder Natalie's words, you mean I'm not fully human, Kira nodded. The test they performed when you arrived confirmed it. You carry elven genes, diluted by many generations but present none and left descendants. The ancient chamber shook with another explosion. Dust and crystal fragments rained down from above, Elder. Natalie moved quickly to the center of the room, her white robes flowing around her like water. She raised her arms and began chanting in a language that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The runes on the walls glowed in response, creating a barrier of light around the chamber that will not hold them for long. The elder said, her voice strained. We must begin the ceremony. Now Zack looked at Faye, who nodded, her expression resolute. She stepped forward, removing her ceremonial armor piece by piece until she wore only a simple tunic beneath. Her silver hair fell loose around her shoulders, catching the light from the glowing runes. You must do the same. Admiral Blackwood instructed Zack. The ancient armor will not bond with you while you wear other garments. Zack hesitated only briefly before removing his elven robes. The air in the chamber was surprisingly warm against his skin. He stood in his undergarments, feeling vulnerable yet strangely calm. Ember moved to stand between him and Faye, the dragon looking from one to the other with expectant eyes. Elder Natalie positioned herself before the floating armor. Her hands traced patterns in the air that left trails of light. The three moons now visible through the damaged ceiling were nearly aligned, their combined light filtering down into the chamber. In the time before time, she intoned, when the stars were young, and the void was vast. The first dragons came to our world. They chose the worthy to bond with, to share their fire and wisdom. The armor before you contains the essence of that first bond. It will test you both. The floating armor began to pulse more intensely. The liquid metal separated into two distinct sets, one clearly designed for Faye's slender form, the other reshaping itself to match Zack's broader human proportions. Admiral Blackwood circled them once clockwise, her red dragon following the prophecy. Speaks of a union between worlds, she said, a bridge across the stars. When ancient enemies return, the mixed blood shall renew what was broken. The dragons shall rise again. The chamber shook more violently. Sounds of battle could be heard from above. Shouted commands, weapons fire. The screeches of dragons. Kira, who had remained near the entrance, called out. They breach the upper levels. The void soldiers approach. There is no more time. Elder Natalie said with urgency, You must take the armor now. Floating sets of armor moved toward Zack and Faye, hovering before them. Zack could feel heat radiating from the metal, if it was truly metal at all. The runes pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Faye looked at him, her violet eyes meeting his. This is beyond what any ceremony was meant to be, she said softly. Are you certain? Zack reached out and took her hand. I complimented your armor and started this whole thing, he said with a small smile. Seems fitting that armor will finish it, Ember chirped, in what sounded like approval. The dragon nudged both their legs, urging them forward. Together they reached for the hovering armor. As Zack's fingers touched the ancient metal, pain shot through his body, white-hot and all-consuming. He would have fallen, if not for Faye's hand still gripping his. She too was rigid with pain, her face a mask of concentration. The armor flowed over them like living water, encasing their bodies in a second skin. Where it touched Zack's flesh, images flooded his mind. The creation of the universe, the birth of the first dragons, the wars that nearly destroyed them. the first elven warriors to bond with the great beasts, the spreading of elven kind across the stars and buried deep in his own DNA. The memory of an elven explorer who came to Earth thousands of years ago, falling in love with a human woman, beginning a bloodline that would eventually lead to him. The pain subsided, replaced by a sense of power and connection unlike anything Zack had ever known. The armor fit him perfectly lightweight, yet he sensed it could withstand tremendous force. The runes glowed against his skin, pulsing with energy. Faye stood before him, similarly encased in the ancient armor. Her silver hair had turned pure white, her violet eyes now glowing with inner fire. She looked at her hands in wonder. "The bond," she whispered, "I can feel everything." Zack nodded, understanding perfectly. He could feel Faye's emotions. Her thoughts, not clearly but present like whispers in his mind. And beyond her, he sensed Ember. The dragon's consciousness now a bright flame connected to them both. And beyond that, fainter but growing stronger, other dragons across the planet awakening to the renewed bond. A thunderous crash shook the entire chamber. Part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the night sky above. The three moons, now in perfect alignment, bathed them in silver light. "They come." "Elder," Natalie shouted. The barrier fails. Black armored figures poured through the breach in the ceiling. Their forms seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear as moving shadows. The emblem on their armor was a twisted serpentine shape. Void Collective soldiers. Admiral Blackwood called, drawing her weapon, "Stand ready." But it was not the soldiers that made Zack's blood run cold. It was the figure that descended after them, a woman in ornate black armor with a face. Zack recognized General Diana Frost, his former commanding officer from Earth Impossible. He whispered. The general landed, lightly among her troops, her cold gaze finding Zack immediately. "Well, Lieutenant Morgan," she said, her voice just as he remembered it, crisp and authoritative. "Though I see you've been promoted to alien consort." How touching. Faye moved protectively toward Zack. "You know this human." "Not human," General Frost corrected. "Not entirely, as I'm sure you've discovered by now." She smiled, a cold expression, devoid of warmth. "Did they tell you the whole truth, Morgan? About what you really are? What your bloodline means?" "Admiral," Blackwood raised her weapon. "Enough of your lies. Void Servant, the ceremony is complete. You have failed." General Frost laughed. "The ceremony? The bonding?" She shook her head. "That was never what we feared. It was what comes after." The awakening. More explosions sounded throughout the Tree City. The entire structure seemed to shudder. Frost gestured, and her soldiers spread out, surrounding the small group. Ember growled, stepping forward, her scales now glowing with intense heat. The dragon had grown larger. Zack realized, standing now at the size of a horse rather than a dog. Her wings extended, fangs bared at the intruders. "You were my commanding officer," Zack said, struggling to understand. "Why are you with the Void?" Collective Frost regarded him with something, almost like pity. "Earth has always been a contested territory, Morgan. The elves claim it because of their ancient outposts. Humans think it belongs to them. But there were others there first. Others who were driven into the Void by the dragons and their elven pets, others who have waited millennia to reclaim what was theirs." As she spoke, her form seemed to shift, her human features becoming fluid, her eyes changing to vertical slits, her skin darkening to a color that seemed to absorb light. "The ancient enemy," Elder Natalie whispered. A void dragon in human form. Frost, or whatever she truly was, smiled, revealing teeth too sharp for a human mouth. "We have lived among humans for centuries, watching, waiting for the prophesied one to appear." She looked at Zack. "You could have had a glorious future with us, Morgan. We would have shown you your true potential. Instead, you chose them." She gestured dismissively at the elves. Zack felt knowledge flowing through him from the armor, ancient memories, not his own. The war between dragons and their dark counterparts, the void dragons who fed on stars and left only darkness behind, their defeat and retreat into the cold places between galaxies, their hatred festering over millennia. The runes on his armor glowed brighter, responding to the threat. Beside him, Faye had drawn a sword that seemed made of pure light. the weapon humming with energy. Admiral Blackwood and her red dragon moved to flank them. Elder Natalie continued her chanting, strengthening. What remained of the barrier ember had grown even larger now, towering over them all. The dragon opened her mouth and flames, unlike any fire Zack had seen, poured forth. The void soldiers scattered, some caught in the blaze, their shadow armor melting, away revealing twisted forms beneath. Frost avoided the flames with inhuman speed. "You cannot stop what has begun," she snarled, her voice changing, becoming deeper, resonant. "Thousands of our kind awaken across the galaxy. The dragons are few, their elven allies weaker than ever, and humans." She laughed. "Are barely more than children playing with forces they cannot comprehend." Another explosion rocked the chamber closer than before. Part of the wall collapsed. Kira screamed as debris fell toward her. Zack reacted without thinking, the armor responding to his will. He moved with impossible speed, catching the young archivist and pulling her to safety. The knowledge of how to use the armor flowed through him. He felt its power, its purpose. Designed, not just for protection, but for channeling the ancient magic that bound dragons and elves Frost attacked. Then her form shifting fully, revealing her true nature. A void. Dragon smaller than ember but radiating malevolence. Her scales absorbed light, creating a silhouette of pure darkness. She lunged at Faye, razor teeth aimed at the elven commanders. Throat Zack moved again, the armor propelling him forward. He intercepted the attack, the runes on his armor flaring with energy where Frost struck him. He felt pain, but the armor held. His hand found the creature's throat, squeezing with strength that surprised even him. Frost hissed in pain, then laughed. "You cannot kill me, half-blood. I am ancient when your ancestors still crawled in mud." But Zack wasn't trying to kill her. The armor, the runes, they were showing him another way. His mind reached for Faye, for Ember, finding them instantly through their shared bond. Now he called mentally. Light faded slowly, revealing a transformed world. The ancient chamber no longer existed in its place, a vast open space beneath the three moons. The tree city around them had changed too. Crystal and wood had merged into something new, something that pulsed with life and power. The damage from the attack was gone, healed by the surge of energy from the portal. Zack stood at the center of it all. The ancient armor still covered his body, but it had changed as well. The metal now looked like liquid, starlight constantly shifting with galaxies and nebulae visible in its depths. The runes glowed with steady power, no longer painful but comforting. Familiar like a second skin. Faye stood beside him, her transformation even more dramatic. Her silver hair now flowed around her like a living thing, moving even without wind. Her eyes held galaxies within them. Her armor matched his, a perfect complement. The bond between them hummed with energy, thoughts and emotions flowing freely back and forth. And Ember. The dragon had grown to her full size, towering above them. Her wingspan could have covered an Earth City block. Her scales shimmered with colors that had no names in human language. Around her, other dragons had appeared, some emerging from the portal, others flying down from above. All of them larger, more vibrant than before. The dragon race reborn. They did it. A voice filled with wonder and awe. Zack turned to see Admiral Blackwood approaching her red dragon beside her, both bowing slightly. As they came closer, Elder Natalie followed, her white robes now embedded with the same runes that covered Zack's armor. Kira and other elves gathered behind them, all staring in amazement. "The prophecy is fulfilled," Elder Natalie said. "The void dragons retreat. The bond is renewed. The ancient ways restored." Zack looked around at the gathered elves, at the dragons circling overhead at the transformed city. Elven citizens were emerging from their homes, looking up in wonder at the dragons, many falling to their knees in reverence. "Did we win?" he asked. Faye took his hand, her thoughts touching his. "This battle?" "Yes," she replied. "The war." She glanced toward the sky where the last of the void ships were retreating. "It has only begun." Admiral Blackwood approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "The council awaits," she said. "They have gathered in the great hall. What remains of it? They wish to understand what has happened here. The ancient armor makes it clear what has happened," Elder Natalie said, her eyes fixed on Zack and Faye. The legends spoke of a time when the Chosen would wear the first armor, when the bond between dragon and elf would be renewed through one of mixed blood, when the three races would stand as one against the Void Ember landed, beside them, lowering her massive head to look Zack in the eye. The dragon no longer needed to send images for Zack to understand her. The connection between them was complete. Her thoughts came to him as clearly as his own. It was always meant to be this way, the dragon communicated. Not just a marriage between two beings, but a union of worlds. The ceremony, the true ceremony, is just beginning. Zack looked at Faye. The same understanding reflected in her eyes when he had complimented her armor. In that diplomatic reception, it had set in motion events written in prophecy, thousands of years ago. His human heritage combined with the long-dormant elven genes had created the bridge. The ancient texts foretold, "Come," Faye said aloud. "The council must be addressed. And beyond them, the people of all worlds, they must understand what has happened, what is still to come." They walked together through the transformed city. Elves bowed as they passed. Dragons flew overhead in formation, their scaled bodies catching the light of the three moons, casting colorful shadows on the ground below Zack's armor. His skin, his very being, hummed with power and purpose. The great hall had been transformed like everything else. What had been a formal chamber was now an open amphitheater, the ceiling gone, revealing the night sky. The council members sat in a circle, their faces showing varying degrees of awe and concern. At the center of the council stood Counselor Alvin, the one who had spoken against Zack earlier. His face was pale, his eyes wide as he watched them approach. "Chosen ones," he said, his earlier arrogance gone. "We witness a miracle. The texts spoke of change, but this..." He gestured at the transformed city, at the dragons above. "This exceeds all understanding." Zack felt knowledge flowing through him from the armor, from Ember, from the very stones beneath his feet. Ancient wisdom, long forgotten, now returned. "We stand at a crossroads," he said, his voice carrying easily throughout the vast space. "The void retreats, but it is not defeated. General Frost and her kind will return with greater numbers. Their hunger for vengeance has only grown over the millennia, but the dragons have returned as well," a counselor said. Faye stepped forward. "The dragons alone are not enough," she said. "Neither are the elves or humans." She turned to look at Zack. "Their strength comes from unity, from the bond that connects them." Zack's mind was filled with visions from the armor. Countless worlds across the galaxy, many already infiltrated by the void dragons disguised as local species. The threat larger than any of them had realized. "We need to warn Earth," Zack said, his thoughts turning to his home planet, vulnerable, unaware of the cosmic war about to engulf it. How many, like General Frost, had infiltrated human governments, military organizations? Ember projected an image into his mind. A vast network of light connecting world to world, instantaneous travel, communication, unity. "The portal," Elder Natalie said as if reading his thoughts. "It remains open. A pathway between worlds. The beginning of a new network. The dragons once created such pathways before the void forced them into hiding. Now they can do so." Again, Admiral Blackwood stepped into the circle. "I have received reports from our outposts across the galaxy," she announced. "The transformation we witness here is happening everywhere. Dragons long dormant awakening, growing to their true size. Ancient structures changing, revealing their true purpose. The armor you wear, chosen ones, it does not simply protect. It creates. It transforms." Zack looked down at his hands, the armor shifting like liquid starlight. He could feel its power, not just defensive, but creative. Each rune a command, a way to reshape reality itself. He reached for Faye through their bond sharing this understanding. She nodded. The ceremony. The true ceremony was not a simple marriage. It was a coronation. The council members seemed to realize this at the same moment. They rose as one, bowing deeply. "What would you have us do, chosen ones?" Counselor Alvin asked. Faye looked at Zack, then at Ember. The dragon projected an image of Earth, of elven ships arriving, of humans, looking up in wonder and fear at creatures they had thought were merely legends. "First we must secure Earth," Faye said. "The Void has targeted it specifically because of its strategic position, its importance to the prophecy, and because of me." Zack added, "How many others like me might exist on Earth? Descendants of elven explorers carrying the genes needed to bond with dragons." Elder Natalie stepped forward. "I will prepare an envoy to Earth," she said. "Your human governments must be approached carefully. The revelation of our existence will be shocking, enough without the context of the Void threat. It could lead to panic or worse." Zack thought of Earth governments, their divisions, their conflicts. How would they react to the arrival of an alien fleet, even one coming in peace? The armor showed him another way. Images of him and Faye returning to Earth, not with an invasion fleet but as representatives, bringing a single dragon egg, a gift, a symbol, a beginning. "We go first," Zack said. Looking at Faye, at Ember, they nodded in agreement. "Show them. Don't tell them. Let them see the bond, let them understand through example." A ripple of approval went through the council. The dragons circling overhead called out in harmony, their voices creating music that seemed to touch the stars. "The armor, the bond, it offers protection," Faye said, "but also connection." She looked at the gathered elves. "We must extend this connection to all worlds, all species willing to stand against the Void. The old divisions, the old conflicts, they mean nothing now." Counselor Alvin bowed his head. "The Sylvan Confederacy stands ready to follow your guidance, chosen ones. Our fleets, our knowledge, our magic, all are yours to command." Zack felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was far beyond the diplomatic mission he had been sent on. It was beyond anything he could have imagined. When he complimented Faye's armor, he had started a chain of events that would reshape the Galaxy Admiral. Blackwood approached. "With your permission, I will begin organizing. Our defenses, the Void Collective, will regroup. They will strike again. We must be prepared." Zack nodded, then stopped himself. This was not his decision alone. Not anymore. He looked at Faye, their thoughts meeting, finding agreement. "Begin preparations," Faye instructed. "But focus on communication connection as much as defense. The more worlds that join us, the stronger we become." As the Admiral departed, a new sound filled the air, a chirping, trilling sound Zack had come to recognize. Not from Ember, but from somewhere else. Somewhere below, Ember raised her massive head, her attention drawn downward. Faye gasped, her hand tightening on Zack's. "The eggs," she whispered. "The hatchery, Elder." Natalie smiled. Her ancient eyes filled with joy. "It begins," she said, "the renewal." The first new clutch in over a century, Zack's armor showed him the way, the knowledge flowing through the runes. They descended through the transformed city, down spiral staircases that shifted and moved to accommodate them. The walls around them glowed with the same energy that filled the armor, that filled the dragons, that filled the bond between him and Faye. They entered a vast chamber deep beneath the tree city. Warm, humid, filled with a